pumped about today. Like I said, today is one of my favorite topics to talk about, and that's project statuses and tags. This is what really makes Dubsado special, is customizing the statuses and tags and adding some flavor to your actual projects page. If you remember from the first week, we talked about the whole goal of Dubsado is to get your workflows into Dubsado, your business process, and then also be able to go to the projects page and comfortably and confidently manage your clients inside the projects page. Today, we're going to do a lot of talk about organizing your projects page so that when you get into your projects page, you can organize people, you know exactly where people are at, and it's going to give you a really good idea of how to organize things. So we're going to talk about that. And then the next week is going to be workflows, and we'll get into setting up workflows and all of that good stuff. So project statuses. Project statuses in Dubsado are milestones that you can create to show where the client is at in your business process or your workflow. That's what your business process is your workflow, or the important steps that they need to go through while they're going through your workflow. Your workflow is your entire customer journey. So another way to explain it is that your workflow is going to end up being your business process from initiation all the way until the completion of that project. That's your workflow. It's your entire customer journey. And your project statuses are going to be like the major cities or the points of interest along the way of that entire scope of the journey. So you're only able to have one status applied at a time, similar to you can't be in two places at the same time. So for example, I put a little map here, a little picture, so you can kind of understand what's happening. Your workflow is going to be this entire stretch, this whole journey that you're going through. And all of these different mile markers along the way, that's what your project statuses are. It's going to show where your client is at in your process. So for example, with this map, if you're starting in, let's say New York and you're going to LA, the project statuses are going to tell you, oh, they're in Illinois right now, or they're going through Iowa. That's my home state. They're going through North Dakota, or whatever the case may be. That's what your mile markers or your project statuses are going to be in the system. So with that being said, project statuses are 100% up to your creativity. There is no such thing as a one size fits all for your project statuses. Everybody's statuses are going to be completely different. And we'll get into that, why that is, when we actually talk about building those into our process. But they can either be as macro as you want them to be or as granular as you would like them to be. Your statuses should reflect what's important to you, what it is that you want to be able to see in your client process. Perfect example before we jump in and get into actually building them out is, let's say that this is your overall journey. Maybe you don't need to know that they're in Tennessee. Maybe that's not important to you. You only want to know when they get to South Dakota. That's important to you. I need to know when they're there. In that case, you wouldn't be building a project status that would say, hey, they're in Tennessee right now, because that's not important to you. But this exact same process for somebody else, they need to know that that person is in Tennessee. So your project statuses, even if you have the exact same workflow or same journey, your project statuses are only going to be what's important to you. So that's what's kind of the big thing with today, is that what we're going to cover is going to be a lot up to you. For your own creativity and what you want to create with them. And we'll talk about that here as we get into it. But just to let you know up front, project statuses are very much up to how you want to use them and how you want to create them. So the key to figuring out what your statuses should be is to look at your workflow and decide what steps are important to you. So if you followed along with everything, we've gotten up to the point where you've written out your process and you've built your content. That's where we're starting at today. That's the starting point. So by this time, you should have your content in the system and you should have your process already written out. So now what we're going to do today is we're going to look at our written out process and we're going to say, okay, out of this process, what of these different things that are happening, what's important to me? What do I need to know that's happening? And that's a great way that you guys at home can look at your process and say, okay, how do I know what my project statuses are going to be? Well, let me look at my process and decide what's important to me in this. And we're going to do that today. So from lesson 2 last week, if you guys have been following along, this is our stopping point that we had last week. Is we went through, we wrote out all of the different things that we want to do in our process, and then we highlighted the content based off of, okay, is it a form? Is it a scheduler template? Is it a canned email? However you guys did that, whether it was sticky notes or different things like that, this should be the point that you're at watching today's session. And it's for you guys who are watching this on YouTube later. This is the point now where you have your process written out and your contents built. So now we're going to expand on that. So now what we're going to do is we're now going to build in project statuses into this process. So we're going to take this round 2 that we had last week, and we're going to expand on it and make it bigger. So now we're going to talk about creating project statuses. So on the projects page, let's jump to the projects page here. And this looks a little bit different than last week because I've already put these in the system, but I wanted to show you guys what it would look like. So when you first sign up for Dubsado, you'll notice that you'll only have the all sections for your signups or for your statuses. So you're not going to have any extra statuses built out. But as we talked about earlier in the first week about the understanding of what a lead is and what a job is, the leads are going to be people who haven't booked with you yet, and jobs are going to be people who have booked with you. So you can either have a lead project or it can transition into a booked job project. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create more statuses at the top that are going to help us identify where exactly this client is at in the lead phase and into the job phase. So this is going to be where we build our different mile markers. So how do you create these and what are they going to be? So what we're going to do, and you guys can do this at home as well. You guys can, get a scratch piece of paper or whatever it is that you want to use, but you're going to identify what your lead statuses are going to be and what your job statuses are going to be. And how you can do that, like I said earlier, is you can look at your process and say, out of this process, what's important to me? So what I did was I looked at my process up here. So the first thing that happens here is they fill out the website form, and then the consultation call scheduler goes out to them. I want to know when that gets sent and when someone books a consultation call with me. So what I want to do is I want to go down here and say, okay, some lead statuses that are important to me is when the consultation gets sent out to them and when it gets booked. That's important. I need to know that. Then I have the consultation with them, and then I need to remember to prep my proposal. And we talked about this last week. I want to have a to-do in there to remind me to prep my proposal. And then I want to send out my proposal, contract, and invoice. So what I want to do is I want to know when I need to prep my proposal, and I want to know when my proposal goes out, when it gets submitted, when the contract gets sent out, or when it gets signed. I'm looking at my different things that I'm doing and deciding what's important to me. So for one, I want to know when it's time for me to prep my proposal. So I'm going to make that a status called proposal prep. I want to know when the proposal goes out to the client. So I have a proposal sent status that I want. The follow-up status, what I want to do there as well is once they haven't filled out the proposal, I need to have a follow-up status, or I need to have something to remind me, okay, they're in this follow-up mode here. Once the proposal gets submitted, I want to know that. Once the contract gets signed, I want to know that. So what I did was I just took what's going on in my different actions here, and I'm deciding which one of these are important to me. Maybe, and as you can see here, I also have the pre-session questionnaire that's going out to the client. That's not important to me. I don't really care. I don't need to know that that's been sent out or that that's been completed. Someone else could have this exact same process and say that's important to me. I need to know when that questionnaire gets completed. For me, I'm not really worried about that. So that's why I'm not going to make it a status. So that's why those statuses are so 100% up to your creativity, is because you can have the exact same process, but some of these actions might not be important to you. Maybe for some of you, the only thing that matters is you want to know when they sign their contract or when they make a payment, and that's it. That's fine. You can do it that way. So that's why you can either make it as macro or as granular as you want to make it. So I've created just a couple here. I want to know these different things. These are things that I need to be made aware of. But now what I'm going to do is I would make those my lead statuses, but now I also want to make my job statuses. So in my business, what makes a lead a booked job? For me, it's when they put money down. I need to have money in my hand before you are a booked job in my business. So what I'm going to do is the first status of them being a booked job is going to be deposit paid. Now, in our system, it's important to know that this is going to be based off of triggers. So what's going to trigger it going into a booked job? If you are familiar with our triggers, and maybe you're not, we'll talk about this a little bit later. But in the workflows, you can only use one trigger at a time. So you can only have one thing be what makes it a booked job. Some of you might have something where it's, well, once they sign the contract and pay the invoice. For statuses, you'll have to determine which one is more important. Is it the contract being signed, or is it the deposit being paid? Because you can only make one status that would be what brings it over into the booked job. So for me, they can sign the contract and that's great, but what matters the most to me is when they put money down. That's what makes them a booked job. So I'm going to make my first status deposit paid, and that's going to be the first thing that makes them a booked job. Then from there, I have the activate the client portal, set the client portal's password. I don't really need to be reminded to do that as a status. That's not really important to me. I do want to know when the client portal email goes out. So I'm going to make client portal sent a status. I want to know when they're checking in email that goes out 8 weeks before. I want that to be a status. So checking in email sent. Similar to the consultation call scheduler, I want to know when the pre-event meeting goes out to the client and when they book on it. So I have pre-event meeting sent, pre-event meeting booked. I want to know when it is 4 weeks out from the event. And we'll talk about this. The project statuses don't always have to be content-based. You could have something where a week before their event or a week before their session or whatever the case may be, you can have a status change that would say, okay, once it's 4 weeks out, I want it to go into this status. So even though I don't have anything in here that's based off of, 4 weeks before the event, I can create statuses that are based off of time before something happens. And I'll show you how to do that here in a little bit. I want to know when the review email goes out to the client. So review email sent. Then I have send a thank you card in the mail. I want to be notified when it's time to do that. And I want to know that that's the status of the project, that I want to send out that thank you card in the mail. So I want to have a send thank you card status. And then also, this isn't a status that you would actually build, but it is moving the status of the project, and you can archive projects. So archive is always one that you can throw at the very bottom to archive that project once everything is done. So this archive can apply to everybody because you'll eventually want to move your projects off of that job page and then into the archive status. So archive is one that you won't create a status for because it's already built into the system. Over here on the right-hand side, you can archive projects there. So I include that as a project status change, but it's really not a project status change. There's a trigger in the workflow, or an action rather, where you can archive the project. So all I did was I sat down and I looked at my actual process, which is what you guys are going to do, and you'll decide what's important to you out of this list, and that's how you're going to generate your statuses. So again, These are completely up to you, but it should be based off of your workflow. So I wouldn't create something that says, let's see, it wouldn't be a waiver sent or non-disclosure agreement sent. I wouldn't put that in my statuses because I'm not doing anything like that in my workflow. So that is a little bit of a guideline. You can't really make it whatever you want it to be. It should be centered around what you're doing in your workflow. So there are some guidelines there, but it should be based off of the different actions you're doing in your workflow. So once I've written these out, now my next step is going to be actually building them. A couple quick points here that I'm going to lay out, and then we'll talk about putting these in the system. When you're building your workflows, and again, we're going to get into this next week, but when you're building your workflows, you can use the action change project status. That's one of the actions you can do in your workflow to automatically move a project from one status to the next, depending on the different triggers you use. So what we're going to end up doing once we get into next week is we're going to have the workflow move these projects into these different statuses based off of certain things happening. So a perfect example would be once the contract gets signed by the client, we want it to move into that status, and the workflow can move that for us based off of the contract being signed. Now, learning the workflow triggers, and again, next week we're going to be all workflow 100% of the time, so it'll make more sense next week. But learning workflow triggers are the key to a precise and efficient workflow. If you don't know what's possible in the triggers that we offer in Dubsado, it's going to make it very difficult to build an effective workflow. So I'll hit on it next week a lot. Learning what the different triggers are in Dubsado is what's going to make you better at workflows. If you're not familiar with what you can activate with different triggers, it's going to be very hard to build a really elaborate workflow or one that's very effective. So let's talk about building these, and then we'll hit on these last 2 points here. So to build a project status, what you're going to do on your projects page is you're going to go over to the right-hand side and click Customize. And this is going to take you to a page where you can build in all of these different statuses. Now at the top up here, you can see where there's the lead section and there's the job section. So it's the same thing as back on your projects page, but you're going to look at your outline and you're going to build these statuses. You're going to build leads and you're going to build your job statuses. What you can do is you can click Add Status up at the top right-hand corner up here. And this is going to be where you can decide if you want to make one that has to do with leads or if you want to make one that has to do with jobs. So I would click on lead and I would type in whatever my lead status would be. Or if I make a job one, then I can put in whatever my job would be. So that's going to be where you build your statuses. And with these as well, you can also click and move these around too. So you don't have to necessarily build them in the right order because you can always go through and reorganize them. You can even, if you want to, take a lead status and drop it down into a job status. So I don't know if you guys knew that you could do that, but you can just restructure those and reorder those. But basically you're going to go through and you're going to build those. Now, one thing you can add in to make it more fun, you can put emojis in there if you want to kind of spice it up a little bit. Throw some emojis in there, make it really fun. My deposit paid has a money sign on there. My contract signed has a little contract with the pencil icon. You can make it fun. Send thank you cards has a little envelope on there. So feel free to kind of spice up your project statuses. Remember, these are up to your own creativity. So have fun with them. But that's going to be where you build your project statuses. Now, a couple of things, and this is going to help you decide what's possible with your statuses. So some of you guys might still say, well, I'm not really sure what I should be putting for my statuses. How do I know what I can do? This is going to help you guys out a lot. Project status changes will most likely be past tense verbs. So for example, it's an update on something that's already been done. So you're going to have things like sent, booked, signed, completed, submitted, paid. It's going to be those past tense things. Because what happens with your workflow is that the workflow is going to complete the action, and then it's going to update the status on what it just did. So it's an action reaction that's going to happen in your workflow. This will make a lot more sense next week when we actually build the workflows. But what happens is, for example, the contract's going to go out to the client. When the client signs the contract, then the workflow is going to notice that it got signed and update the status. Or the workflow will send out the scheduler template for you. And then once it gets booked on, it can update the status into booked. So your statuses are always going to be a reaction of something that's going on in your workflow. So the workflow does the action, and then there's a reaction. So hopefully that makes sense, but most likely 90% of the time, your statuses are going to be something sent or something booked, something signed, something completed, because you're always watching for something to get done. Now, what I did for you as well is I took some of the different things that you're going to be doing in your workflow and gave you some examples of what you can use. So if you're sending out a scheduler, you can use scheduler sent, scheduler booked. If you're using forms, you can use terms like this form sent, or this form completed, this form submitted, or we do have a trigger in the workflow where if a certain form hasn't been completed, you can have it go into a follow-up. We'll talk about that here in just a little bit. So you can have a follow-up section for contracts, contract sent, contract signed, any emails, specific emails, you can do this email has been sent. When it comes to invoices, you could say invoice sent or deposit paid, paid in full or fully paid. Maybe when they pay in full, you want it to be an active client. Any tasks that you need to get done. So for example, up here, I want to put in send thank you cards. I need to be reminded to do that. Or once it's time for me to prep my proposal, that's a task that needs to get done. So you can make statuses different tasks and where you're at in your task list. And then the other thing too, I mentioned it earlier with my upcoming status. I want it to go into upcoming 4 weeks before this actual event or this session or when something is due. So you can also make statuses based off of time. If they are 4 weeks out, 3 weeks out, 2 weeks out, you can create those as statuses to almost represent like a timeline. So you can make statuses based off of time before or after an event or appointment if you want to. So those are some examples for you. Take these right here and then use those with your written out status to help you understand, okay, I want to watch for this scheduler to get sent or this to get signed. So that should help you when it comes to understanding what you can build. But again, it is up to your creativity, understanding what you actually want to be made aware of in your statuses. So those are project statuses. Now what we're going to do is, this is my favorite part. We're going to take those statuses that we built. So we have all of these right here, and we're going to now put these into our overall process here. So we're going to take this thing to the next level. So now that we have our statuses built in the system and we know exactly where this client is going to be at in the journey, now what we'll do is we're going to take those statuses and we're going to put those into the process. So what I did was I took the term change project status, because that's what it's going to be in the workflow, is it's going to be called change project status. And I added this into what we already did. So this is the same process, except what I did was I took those statuses and I pushed those into this overall process here. And I used purple down at the bottom here, and we'll talk about the different status changes, but I made purple my project status changes. So now I have different color coding for all the different things that I'm going to be doing. So consultation sent, I want to change the project status after the scheduler gets sent. Then I want to change the project status again once it gets booked on. Pretty simple. Once I get reminded to prep the proposal, so once I create that to do in the workflow, then I want to have it go into that status to remind me, oh, they're at this step in my overall process. Once the proposal gets sent, I want that to be a status change. Once the proposal gets submitted, I want it to go to proposal submitted. Follow-up status, I want them to go there if they don't submit the proposal in a week. I want it to go to contract signed when they sign their contract, and then deposit paid after they make their deposit. So I just took those status changes and I just meshed them in. Now, as you can see here, the only way you can really do this is if you know what's possible here. So if I don't know that you can follow up with a client a week after they haven't submitted their proposal, then I wouldn't know to make that a status. So what you guys can do if you would like is if you go into the workflow section, if you want to just open up the triggers and look at the different triggers that are available, you can use that as to know what's possible, to know that you can send something out before a project date or after a project date, or send something out after a scheduler template has been booked, or before an appointment time or after an appointment time. So if you want to, you can go through and look at some of those different triggers and then decide what's possible there too as well. So then after the client portal email goes out, send it to client portal sent. Once the checking in email goes out, it goes to checking in email sent. So as you can see, it's an action and then a reaction. So it sends out the email, it updates the status. It sends out this email, it updates the status. Once the pre-event meeting scheduler goes out, pre-event meeting sent, pre-event meeting booked. Right about in here is where they're going to be 1 week out from the event. So I just want to update the status to upcoming 1 week before the event. Once the email goes out, review email sent, 1 week after their event is over, I want to be reminded to send the thank you cards. And then a to-do will get created, and then archive project is the last thing. It's kind of like a project status change at the end. So this looks extremely intimidating here because there's a ton of actions, but what I did was I just broke it down and I just added in my project status changes. It's the exact same process as we went through in week 2, but now it just looks a little bit more meatier because it has those project status changes in there. And what I did as well was to help you guys kind of understand the break off in between there so it didn't look too long, is I split this up between the lead phase. So this is when they're in their lead phase. So I should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 statuses. So I have I think I'm actually missing one here. Maybe it's one that I did not put in this mess. Let's see. You're actually seeing something happen here. Oh, proposal submitted. I do have that in there. Oh, and deposit paid after they made their deposit. We'll talk about that and breaking things down when that should get activated. That's something that's for the workflow. So we'll save that for next week so I can show you why I put that one over into this section for when I'm building this out. But what this is basically going to be is the lead phase of your workflow. And then this is the job phase of your workflow. So you can kind of see that there's a break off point, and that will help you so it doesn't look like one long workflow. You can break it up kind of into different sections. And again, next week, I'll explain why I broke it up into 2 sections, but this will help you at least for adding in your project status changes. So hopefully that helps you guys out. That's over project status changes. To kind of sum this up, and as you can see, project statuses should be where your client is at in your overall process. So that's what they're designed for, is to show where the client is at. Now let's get into tags. Tags in Dubsado are going to be ways that you can identify different groups or people in Dubsado. So tags are markers, or they're literally hashtags that you can put on projects to help group and categorize your clients based off of service type, based off of group, demographic, or any other identifying item that you want to be able to easily search for your clients with. Projects are able to have multiple tags added to them at once. So if you're familiar with Instagram and people are putting all the different hashtags on there, it's because you want to be able to search through all of those different hashtags. You can put as many tags on a project that you want to. but you can only have one status at a time. So that's why you don't want to make your statuses different types of clients you're working with, because you can only have one. And again, kind of like on our journey map, you can only be in one place at one time. But with tags, you can create as many as you want to and put those on projects, so you can group people together based off of type. So some examples of that would be like logo design, graphic design, branding, portraits, headshots, one-on-one coaching, group coaching. You kind of get the message there. It's going to allow you to put people into different groups and categories based off of service type, anything that you really want to group people together with. So how you'll do that is also in the customized page here. So if we scroll down to the very bottom, you'll see along the bottom here, this is where you can create your tags. So I have my logo design, graphic design, branding. What you'll do is you can click add tag down here in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can just build your tags based off of what you want to identify your clients with. So it can really be anything. Again, these are up to your creativity. This is what you can add on to projects. So similar to project statuses, tags are 100% up to your creativity. Use this phrase to help identify what tags will best benefit you. I'm always wanting to search for these type of clients. When you say that to yourself, whatever first pops into your head, those are what tags are going to be for your specific business. Some people might have tags that are completely different from somebody else, and they're in the same industry. They might even have the same workflow process, but tags are going to be ways that you can identify people that you're always wanting to search for. So hopefully that helps you guys kind of brainstorm what good tags would be for you. The reason that tags are important is because you can use our filtering system on the projects page to help group certain tagged people together. So what you can do, since I have my tags created, is I can go to a project, and there's also ways to do this automatically as well, but I can go into a project here, and on the left-hand side, there's a tag section. So I can add, let's say, a one-on-one coaching tag up here. So now this is a one-on-one coaching client. On my projects page now, what I can do is you can see there's a little yellow dot now next to that project that helps me identify what type of client this is. What I can do now that I have tags is I can go up to this filter option, and I can filter by any one of the tags that I have. So if I want to bring up everybody who is in graphic design, it's going to get rid of that project because I don't have that tag on there. But if I remove this and I say I want to do one-on-one coaching, that will leave this project up based off of what status it's in. So you can search by multiple tags. So if you want to say, I want to see all of my one-on-one coaching people who are also local, let's just say that that's a tag that you put, or my one-on-one coaching people who are out of state. It will bring up people that have both of those tags in there, so you can combine tags and search for things in that way as well. What this allows you to do is if you go to a certain status, so let's say I want to see all of my people who are upcoming and they're a part of my one-on-one coaching or my headshots or whatever tag, you can now filter through the tags and the statuses, and it will bring up a combination of those people. So this is how you can use the projects page to organize where people are at and what type of clients you're working with. This is what these two items in the projects page are designed for, is to organize your projects page. Once you have your list pulled up of whoever it is you're searching for, you can now click export and export out a CSV file of everybody who appears right here. So use those tags and the statuses and the combinations of both of those to export out any list that you want to into a CSV. You can upload that into, let's say, like MailChimp and send out an email blast if you want to. So that's going to be how you can use statuses mixed with tags to help organize your projects page, so that when you come to your projects page, you can confidently manage your clients because you know exactly where they're at, and you know what type of clients you're working with as well, and you have markers on there to help identify that. Pro tip: you can only automate tags based off of the available workflow triggers. So again, what you can do, you can manually add tags, but you can also automate that process as well. And we'll talk about the automation way of doing it when we get into workflows, but you can only add tags as an automated way based off of a workflow trigger. So you have to know what's available for those workflow triggers. Tagging an individual based off of a different service. So if they click, package B on their proposal, you can't tag them based off of that because we don't have that as a workflow trigger. So things like that, you'll have to manually add tags, but you can add tags based off of the workflow element. So if you remember from lead capture in week 1, we talked about putting all of your different services. So if they're one-on-one coaching, or if they are group coaching, or they're doing a mastermind or whatever it is, you can have tags be added based off of that overall workflow starting, but it wouldn't be able to be added based off of certain packages on forms. I hope that makes sense, because you can only use automation with tags based off of workflow triggers. So once a workflow has started, you could do like a paid tag or something like that based off of something being paid if you really wanted to. But that's going to be how the tags work. And you can always add them in manually, or there are ways to add them in automatically. We'll talk about that next week. So one other thing I forgot to mention, once you have your statuses built, if you just want to manually change them, you can click this drop down next to the status and put them in whatever status you want them to be in. The automated way, like I said, we'll get into that next week with workflows. But if you just want to manually update a status, which you probably will have to do once you get done with certain tasks or different things like that, you may want to manually update them to go into certain areas. So if you ever need to manually update a status, you can do so right here. A lot of people, when you're first getting into your account and you see just all and all, or no status, that just means there's not specific statuses built yet. So you'll just want to add in some more statuses there. So if I wanted to update this, let's say now they're in the, we'll just say they're in the contract signed area right now. So that's where they're at. And you'll see now it moves them over to leads, and they're in the contract signed area. So now I know everybody that's in that status. So that's how you can kind of navigate around that. So perfect. So now that we've done that, that's our big piece of today, is understanding project statuses and tags. Now we're going to get into a portion that a lot of people don't necessarily enjoy, but it is extremely crucial, and I'll help you understand why here today. Now we're going to get into manual testing and understanding why it's important to go through and manually test things before you even get into workflows. So why is manual testing important? Because when you're building your workflow, you're going to take the knowledge of what you know about the system, and you're going to program a workflow based around that. So for example, if you're going to send out an appointment scheduler to a client, but you're not even familiar with really how to send an appointment scheduler or how any of that works, once you get into the workflow, you might be kind of overwhelmed because you're not really sure how that works. If you want to send a form in a workflow and you're not familiar with how sending forms in Dubsado works, once you get into the workflow, it's going to be hard to program that. So another reason that testing is important, and I haven't added this in there, but this is a good explanation why, is let's say that you are a pilot and you're going to fly an aircraft from New York to LA, and you're getting into the plane and you're a brand new pilot, you're fresh out of the academy, and you're getting into a plane for the first time. It's your first commercial flight, and you're going to be flying all these people over to Los Angeles. When you get into the plane, a lot of people think, well, I'm just going to click the autopilot button and I'll be good. I can lay back, get a coffee, talk to my co-pilot. I can talk to the stewardesses if I want to, and I'm just going to click autopilot and I'm going to be fine. But if anything should happen, do you know what all the different buttons inside of the cockpit are going to do? If you're not familiar with how a project works, how to send a form, if someone needs an email, how do you send that out? If you're not familiar with how to manually fly an aircraft, then you shouldn't be comfortable with going in and clicking autopilot. The reason why is because in business, there's no such thing as the perfect client. No process is just going to go smoothly every single time. There's no such business that works that way. So you're going to have times where a client might say, hey, I never received that form. Can you send it again? And if you don't know how to send forms, then you go into panic mode. Or if someone says, hey, I'm actually going to be out of town in a week, can we bump up our appointment? If you have your workflow set for a certain time frame and you're relying on the client to follow that timing and you're not sure how to manually do something, then you might get a little nervous. And even if I just say that to you and I say, hey, what if 20 leads come in and they want to update their appointments? How do you do that? That's why manual testing is important before you build your workflows, so that if something does happen where the client needs something, or you have to reschedule something or send something out later or sooner, you're comfortable with it. And that's what we want you guys to feel as well when you get into Dubsado. So how do you do this? What you'll do first is you'll set yourself up as a test client. Create yourself as a test client with a project using your email address. So what you can do, and this is actually a pro tip for you guys who are still on a trial. For those of you guys, is a Dubsado hack. If you want to avoid using one of your trial clients as a test, go into your address book, change the sample client that comes with your account, change that to your email, and you can create as many test projects as you want to under that client. So what you can do is, and as you can see, I'm on a trial too. So what I can do now is I can go underneath the utilities section and go to my address book, and here's my sample client with this fake email. I can go into this client and click edit on the information, and I can change this email out to Cameron@Dubsado.com. And when I do that, and I'll save this, now what I can do is I can create projects under this client's information. So if I if I refresh this page here, and I'll jump into this project now, it should have my email now as the email for this client. So let me click in here really quickly and pull it up. And so now you can see that my email is who I'm going to be sending things out to. So before you're using real clients, before you're sending things to people without sure how things work, create yourself as a test client. And by doing that, you can guarantee that nothing will be sent out to a real client ill-advised. You can send yourself emails, send yourself proposals. You can see how the system works and get familiar with it. So you can either create a brand new project. So let's say you go to your projects page here, and you can click on new project and just create a new one from scratch and then make yourself the client. I would change the name to my name, but you can put yourself as the client on this new project. Or as long as you're using the same email, so if you're using Cameron@Dubsado.com or whatever your email is, don't use my email. So don't use my email as the test, because then I'll get 1,001 emails. Use your own email. But what you can do is you can go to the lead capture form and open up the direct link. We talked about that in week 1, where you have the public URL. Go through, fill that out, put in your email as the email, and it will just create a new project for you underneath the same name, and it won't cut into your trial clients. It still counts as one client. You'll just have a ton of different projects in there underneath the same client. Feel free to go in and test. Trial and error is your best friend when you're first getting started with Dubsado. So you have that. That's what you'll do first. You'll set yourself up as a test client, and then you'll go through and start testing out your content. So what you can do is there's 2 different ways to test content in Dubsado. There's only 2. The first way is you can actually send yourself the email. I know this seems very kind of simple and basic, but you can send yourself the email. The reason that you want to do this and send yourself the email is because you want to know what it looks like when it comes in as if you're the client. You want to see, okay, when I send this email to a real client, what does it look like to the client when that email comes through? So sending yourself emails and opening them up in your email account will help you understand kind of from an aesthetic standpoint. Do I like the way this email looks? Are things pulling in appropriately? If you're using smart fields, is that pulling in the info correctly? You want to go ahead and test those things out. If you're sending yourself an email in Dubsado, this is a quick tip for you, especially if you're sending out like a form, a contract, something like that. What you'll need to do is once you send yourself the email, you'll want to log out of Dubsado first before opening up that email in your email account. The reason why is because if you're logged into Dubsado, your browser can tell that the business owner is logged in. So when you open up the form in your Gmail or your Yahoo, it's going to say hello business owner at the top, and that's not actually what the client sees. So if you are doing the email method, once you send the email, log out of Dubsado and then open up the form in your email so that it thinks that a real client is opening it up and not the business owner. So that's a little pro tip for you. The second way to do this is just to test to see if forms look the way that you want them to. This isn't the email route where you want to see what an email looks like. This is from a form standpoint, just to test forms out. What you can do is you can use the incognito window method to do that. What you'll do is when you go into a project, and I'll show you guys how to do this, it might not pull this up since I'm doing this in an incognito window. I'm not sure if it will, but what you can do is in the form section here, you can take any forms that are in your project and click view on them, or you can add in your own form however you want to do it. But what you'll do is when you add the form in and you add it to the project, you'll see that there's a copy link. I'm copying the link to this exact form that's in this specific project. If I click copy link and then I go up to my browser and I open up an incognito window, and I'm not sure if this is going to show up for you guys, but if you paste that link in your incognito window, then you'll see this form as the client would see it. Let me jump over here and see if you guys can actually see that. I don't think it's actually coming through. So you won't be able to see that, but that method is what you'll use whenever you're sending things out. So copy the link to the form, open up an incognito window or a private window, I think is what it's called in Safari. Use Google Chrome though if you're using Dubsado, just another pro tip for you. But if you open up an incognito window and paste that link in there, that opens up the form as if the client sees it. So it basically hides the fact that you're logged into Dubsado. So you don't always have to send yourself an email every time you want to test a form out. Just go into the project, copy the link, incognito window, paste the link, and then that will open it up as the client would see it, and you can fill it out if you would like to. One thing to remember though is if you're doing it this way, you're actually doing it in that project as if you're the client. So if you're using this method on a real client, you're filling out the form for them, and the status badges, all of that will update. So you would actually be signing the contract if you're doing this for a real client. So don't use this method if you are actually filling it out for a client. Do that in a test project. So just remember, if you do the incognito method, you're actually doing that in the project. And if you're testing a workflow out, which we'll talk about next week, you're actually going to want to use that because that's what will trigger the next action in your workflow. So incognito method is a great way to just see what the client's going to see. And then the other thing too that a lot of people have questions on is, well, what if I want to have an invoice and something's triggering off of an invoice? How do I test that? What you'll do is you'll go into the actual invoice itself. So you'll have an invoice created here. And if you go up to the top and click apply payment, you can add in a manual payment here. So back in week 1, we talked about if you accept cash, if you accept check or Venmo, Cash App, anything like that, anything outside of our processors, this is how you apply a payment manually, and it will still trigger the workflow if you have something set up based off of it. So click apply payment, and then you can go in, you can add in how they paid, how much they paid. If you want to put in a description and say they paid me via Venmo or something like that, you can add that into this modal here, and that's going to balance the invoice. So when you're testing to see if you want to see if something's paid, without having to go through Stripe, pay the amount, and also the processing fee, just go into the invoice here and click apply payment, and you can kind of bypass actually paying yourself money. So That's going to be how you can test content in the system. Either send yourself the actual email, log out of Dubsado and fill it out, do the incognito method, or if you want to just apply payments to things to test that out, you'll do apply manual payments. Or if you want to pay yourself, you can do that too. There's a processing fee, so I don't recommend it. But if you want to actually test it, maybe do like $1 and actually pay it. And you can test it that way too if you actually want to test payments. So that's how you test your content. Now we'll get into the homework. We're all done for today. We'll get into the homework. Now, what I did was I took all of the homework that we had for the past 2 weeks and I put it up top over the top of the homework for today. So if this is your first time, you shouldn't just start with this. You should be going through and going back and getting these pieces done first. So if you've been following along and you're done, you should have all of this accomplished at this point. It's important to celebrate the victory. So I want to show you guys what you guys have accomplished so far if you're at this moment. You've gotten a lot done in your account, and then these 3 things are going to be what you'll do for this week. The first thing, you'll build out your project statuses. So go through your written out process. That's how you'll do it. Go through that process and identify what project statuses are important to you, and then go in and build those project statuses. That should be pretty simple. It shouldn't take too long to do that based off of kind of how we looked at it. And you should just use those same techniques. And then also build out your tags. So if you have tags in your business that you really want to add in there, you'll build those in there. And then this is probably going to take the longest, but it is so, so important to do. This is the most important out of anything else. I want you guys to complete your process from the very beginning. So if you go up to the top up here, so you can start with email the consultation call if you want to, or if you really want to, you can fill out a lead capture form, but you're going to go through this process here and use the project status one that has the statuses in there. You're going to go through this process, all of it, and you're going to do all of this manually from the beginning all the way until the end, and you're going to do it successfully. The reason you're going to do this is because this, learning what you're doing there, is going to be what you do in a workflow. So if you can go through and manually and successfully go through your process, then you're going to be very, very well off when you build your workflow. So what does that mean to complete your process? Well, what I would do if this was my process is the first thing I would do is I would send the consultation call scheduler to myself, and I would book an appointment with myself. Once I've done that, I would go into the project status, and you can do that in their project too if you want to, and I would update their status to consultation sent. And then apparently it would be booked. So then you could go here and do consultation booked and update that status. What is this doing for you? It's helping you understand what your workflow is actually going to be doing. So if you have a project status change built into your workflow and you don't really know what a project status change does or where it's located or how to change that, then it can freak you out a little bit. So by going through and doing all of these steps manually, that's going to help you be confident on when the workflow is running, what it's actually doing in the background. It helps you not fear the robot, basically, because if the robot's running and you have no idea what it's doing on the back end, that can be intimidating. But if you look at your workflow and say, okay, well, when it's updating this project status or it's sending this form out, I know in my head what it's actually doing. You don't have to be scared of workflows. So this will probably take the most time, but at this point, you have your statuses written out, you have your process written out, you have your content built in the system, so you don't have to go in and build your scheduler at this time or go in and build your questionnaire. You already have that done. So just go into the project, send yourself the scheduler, and then you can go into your email and book an appointment with yourself. Go in and fill out your questionnaire, fill out your proposal and your contract. Make sure you like the way it looks. Maybe you have something in there that you might say, this looks terrible. I need to fix this. That's what this is for, is because you don't want to use this process on a live client and it looks terrible, or you have things missing, or you're not sure if the email looks the right way. Quality can earn you more business. So make sure that you go through this, test for quality on this. This is your quality assurance type area here before you go in and build your workflow, and it'll build that confidence for you. This is also very important as well. Once you get done with that, I want you guys to understand that a very big goal has been achieved. What this means is at this point in the setup process, if you've gone through and you can manually take care of a client, you should be able to take on clients in the system manually and assist them. What that means is that if someone comes in, you should be able to go in and send them a scheduler template, update their project status. You should be able to do these things confidently and take on clients. Now, you don't have your workflows done, obviously. That's what kind of takes it to the next level. But you should feel confident now and say, okay, I can start bringing clients into Dubsado and I can start just sending things to them manually. I can send my checking in email. I can send this out to them. So this is a big goal. A huge misconception about Dubsado is that you have to have workflows in the system in order to just use the software. That's not true at all. One of the big things is to be able to go in and confidently just send things out to clients. So once you've done that and gone from initiation to completion manually and successfully, now you should feel that you can start accepting clients in and at least know what you're doing in the system to start using Dubsado to nurture those leads and turn them into booked jobs. Being able to manually handle incoming clients is a big win. So be proud of yourself at this moment. You don't have to feel like workflows is the mountaintop. This is actually the mountaintop, knowing that you can run your business operations inside of Dubsado on your own. That's a big accomplishment in itself. So take heart in that. And then workflows just kind of takes it to that next level and kind of takes some of the pressure off of you. That's really all workflow does. So that's going to be your thing, your 3 pieces of homework: project statuses, tags, and then go through your process and actually do all of those things manually in a test project, not a live client. We want to make sure that we have quality in our different processes. So those are the 3 things that you'll do between this week and next week.